Donald Trump has delivered a major salvo in his trade war, this time aimed squarely at Canada. In a letter addressed to Prime Minister Mark Carney and posted on social media, Trump said the U.S. will charge Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian.
The government of Canada will be responding by matching the U.S. approach,
$22 billion is the gigantic figure on the economic battlefield that has just exploded across North America's entire supply chain. After President Trump swung the hammer, hiking tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum by 50%, Ottawa immediately hit back with the exact same dollar. A 50% tariff slammed straight onto $22 billion worth of American goods. The immediate consequence, electric vehicle motors, Detroit pickup frames, and even the beer can shells millions of Americans pop open every night are all suddenly shooting up in price. Never before have American consumers' wallets, already weathering an inflation storm, been struck so hard, so fast, and so headin'. Is the White House setting a trap for its own electric vehicle strategy, turning the dream of leading EVs into a nightmare right on home turf? Find out in today's video, and don't forget to hit subscribe on Deep State so you never miss the latest in political economic news. Carney needed no more than 48 hours to sign the retaliatory order, slapping a new tariff on an American goods basket worth roughly $22 billion USD, while declaring that the White House's national security argument was nothing but blind protectionism built on faulty data. According to the detailed list released by Canada's Ministry of Finance, 284 items from electric vehicle motors and FS series pickup steel frames to aluminum coils for K&M will immediately face punitive tariffs. The total value reaches 30 billion Canadian or about 22 billion US. The blow ricochets through the North American supply chain at once. 90% of the steel and 50% of the aluminum US companies currently use originates in Canada, while Canada consumes up to 1/5 of America's steel exports. The impact shows up instantly on the invoice. Imported EV motor prices have soared 12% after only 3 trading sessions. Aluminum beer can sheet on the Chicago Board of Trade has popped above 3,500 USD per ton, the highest since 2022. Beverage giants quickly warned they would have to reevaluate their summer discount plans. Carney didn't stop at tariffs. He ordered every incoming steel batch to file full melt and pour data from furnace and mine of origin to CO2 per ton to prove Canadian steel is cleaner and traceable, thanks to 94% of production running on cheap hydropower. Analysts call it a climate weapon, a move that fits the ESG trend and makes U.S. coke-fired steel hard to compete if Washington opts for a countercase at the WTO. At the same time, Ottawa unveiled an emergency $1.5 billion USD support package for Quebec smelters to boost capacity and safeguard jobs. Yet only 7 days in, the Aluminum Association of Canada warned that loan demand had already almost maxed out the budget cap, forcing the government to consider fresh injections, because if America's 50% tariff drags on, plant cash flow will run dry before winter. Responding to fears of empty coffers, Carney coolly stated, "We will not back down, only level up the game," implying he is ready to widen tariff rates and slap tight quotas on U.S. steel and aluminum should Washington fail to de-escalate before the 21st of July deadline. While U.S. EV makers are still scrambling for motors and gearbox batteries, the White House suddenly faces a thorny question. The 50% blow meant to corner Canada has boomeranged, landing squarely on its own ambition to dominate the domestic EV market. If the next negotiation round fails, tariffs on both sides of the border could climb to 70%. A scenario the Bank of Canada estimates would evaporate another 0.8 percentage point of North American GDP within 6 months. In this suffocating atmosphere, investors are holding their breath. Who will blink first? Trump facing election year inflation or Carney fashioning himself as Ottawa's steel shield? The retaliation fire is already blazing, and this time neither side has a retreat path. Material prices across North America exploded overnight. Less than 24 hours after Ottawa signed its counterorder, the Midwest Cold-Rolled Steel Index, the backbone steel for pickup frames and EV shells, shot up by a full $60 US per short ton, lifting the spot quote to $1.60 per ton, the highest since mid-2022. The next jolt came from aluminum. The Midwest Premium used to price everything from battery anodes to beer can sheets surged 54%. Topping an 8-month high at 0.58 USD per pound, approximately 1,270 USD per ton on June 2nd. Goldman Sachs warns it could climb to 0.70 USD per pound once the 50% tariff truly filters through the supply chain. The immediate casualty is the packaging sector. Ball, Crown, and beer. Giant Modelo all sounded the alarm. Imported aluminum cans and beer alone now face an extra 25% surcharge stacked on top of the steel and aluminum duties, pushing can costs into double-digit territory in just 3 days, and threatening to spill fresh inflation onto the grocery aisle. Yet the hardest punch lands squarely in Detroit. Ford has already admitted the new labor contract alone adds roughly $850 USD to the cost of every vehicle, mainly FS series pickups, before it even factors in the 50% steel and aluminum tariff. A chilling J.D. Power report dated April 23 projects that to keep sales at acceptable levels, automakers will have to swallow most of the hike, an estimated 70% rather than pass it fully to buyers, vaporizing margins at Ford, GM, and Tesla before the bill ever reaches Canadian consumers. Even if they try to pass costs along, the ceiling appears quickly. Anderson Economic Group calculates Americans must brace for more than $30 billion in the very first year solely because of car and parts tariffs. In the pickup segment alone, costs could balloon by $8,000 per unit. That jump is nearly 10 times the $850 Canadian dollars Ottawa modeled for raw materials alone, and the smaller number still falls squarely on corporate profit, never hopping the border. Back to Canada, the electric vehicle arena takes an even colder shower. Samsung SDI warns that imported battery materials, especially aluminum-coated anode foil and copper separator film, are incurring higher costs right on the factory floors in Indiana and Michigan. They won't yet say whether Tesla, Rivian, or GM Ultium will see price hikes, but concede second quarter margins will be as thin as battery foil because of the new levy. With the IRA green tax credit capped at $7,500 per vehicle, a spike in aluminum and steel prices could swallow that entire federal incentive, turning it into a reverse tax, battering Washington's own electrification ambitions. In short, within barely a week, North America has endured a double shock. Record jumps in raw material prices, chaos in can packaging, and automakers shouldering 70% of the burden just to keep the sales wheels from skidding. Analysts dub it the $22 billion earthquake. Yet, with these numbers still jumping, that earthquake may only be the opening tremor. Just 3 weeks after trading 50% tariff blows with the United States, Prime Minister Mark Carney yanked open yet another heavy weapon box, the $4.8 billion Canadian Green Steel Fund. That colossal figure didn't fall from the sky. The single conversion megaproject at Arcelor Middle Dofasco in Hamilton alone has already swallowed 1.8 billion Canadians. Al Steel in Sault Ste. Marie has just received $420 million Canadian in federal money to swap its blast furnaces for electric arc furnaces EAF. The remainder is drawn from the Net Zero Accelerator Framework, an $8 billion CAD-EP pot that pours into heavy-emitting sectors. The industry ministry says now prioritizes steel and EV batteries. Rough math shows the two flagship mills have soaked up nearly 2.2 billion Canadian dollars. Carney vows to open the tap for the remaining 2.6 billion within 18 months. Enough to turn North American steel into a brand cutting CO2 by 60% before 20130. In return, Canada's steel sector must shed its skin in the heart of a tariff storm. Dofasco will scrap the blast furnace oxygen converter route entirely, switching to hydrogen-fired Dr. EAF to slice 3 million tons of CO2 a year. ALG aims to use 70% recycled scrap, turning Ontario into the backyard of Detroit's EV supply chain. The Finance Ministry insists every ton of subsidized steel carry a carbon passport detailing ore, energy source, and emissions per coil of cold-rolled sheet. Thus, Carney not only parries the White House's tariff strike but also exploits the price lull to restructure the entire metallurgy map, nighttime EAFs powered by Quebec Hydro, green hydrogen DRRI in Labrador, and a pellet export corridor to Japan and Korea. Yet, the tech shield is not enough. Ottawa has opened a legal front. On March 13th, Canada formally filed WTO case DS-635 against the U.S. for scrapping steel aluminum exemptions and hiking tariffs to 50%. Though the WTO appellate body remains paralyzed after Washington blocked judges since 2019, Carney calls the suit a pin pulled on the safety lever, readying the stage for multilateral retaliation. The Commerce Department has secretly shared evidence files with Tokyo and Seoul, two East Asian allies whom President Trump slapped with an extra 25% duty on July 8. If the three clean steel economies lodge simultaneous WTO cases, the political pressure could strike straight at Trump's America First campaign mantra. Beyond the lawsuit, Carney has sprung a domestic trap. Starting July 21st, every federal infrastructure contract must use Canadian steel and aluminum, while a third country import quota blocks Chinese steel from sneaking through the U.S. and re-exporting to Canada. The rule forces Ford, GM, Tesla, and even beverage giants to crunch the cost equation. Import U.S. parts hammered by Canada's 50% tariff, or pivot to green supply right in Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie. Carney calls this the three-pronged assault. Symmetric tariffs ricochet pain back to Washington. Green money upgrades the mills and multilateral legal pressure encircles the field. The ultimate goal is not merely to cool the metal war, but to make the White House rethink its EV supply chain where Canada's clean steel, anodized aluminum, and battery casings are becoming irreplaceable links. If Washington refuses to de-escalate before the election, each American pickup will shoulder nearly $850 Canadian dollars in extra material costs, while Canada finishes revamping zero-carbon steel lines for direct export to Europe, cashing in on the EU's carbon border levy. In this tariff poker game, Carney is betting on 4 words. Turn crisis into leverage. The $4.80 8 billion Canadian boost may be the calm before a bigger storm. Yet, it is enough to cast Ottawa as the clean steel champion just as the EV market erupts. And Trump, he must decide fast. Go easy on his neighbor, or watch U.S. consumers pay dearly for beer cans and pickup frames, right in the heart of campaign season. Conclusion? Canada flips the board, with beer cans suddenly pricier, and EV lines stalling. The question shoots out who swallows the 50% tariff, consumers or the Made in USA badge. Mark Carney sees that weak spot clearly, setting up a two-way board. Either Washington cuts tariffs or North America reboots into a green metal chain led by Canada. The ironic fulcrum, the electric pickup fresh off the Texas line, now hinges on every cent of clean aluminum pricing in Quebec. If Trump backs down, inflation cools, Detroit keeps margins, and the green dream keeps rolling. Otherwise, one fiery tweet could ignite trade war 2.0, dragging in tariffs on copper, lithium, and EV batteries, the lifeblood of the green economy. In this poker round, Carney plays 3 cards. Symmetric tariffs for immediate pain, the Green Steel Fund for the future, and the WTO lawsuit as political insurance. How many cards does Washington have left when beer can prices climb and IRA credits are eroded by its own levy? The market won't wait long to deliver its verdict. The next 3 weeks will decide whether America First morphs into America Pays, or a compromise is inked before automakers halt their welding lines. Which scenario do you choose? Join forces in a green steel alliance or charge into trade war 2.0? Drop your view right below in the comments. And don't forget to hit subscribe on Deep State and ring the bell so you never miss our latest political economic updates.